Hi, it's May, Taehyung. I don't really know how to start this because this isn't the kind of story I ever imagined I would talk about publicly. You all know me for my music, my performances, my laughter, the happy moments I share with you, and I'm grateful for that. But today isn't about the stage. It isn't about spotlights, awards, or perfection. Today, I want to talk as a person, not as an idol, not as V of BTS, just Taehyung. I know many of you have followed me for years and you've seen me grow, change, make mistakes, learn, and be shaped by the people around me. One of those people, maybe the most important, is Jungkook. And there's something about our story, something about a moment that changed everything between us that I've kept inside for a long time. This isn't gossip. This isn't fan service. This isn't a rumor. This is something real that happened, something that affected our friendship, our trust, our relationship as members, and honestly, the way I see myself. So, if you're watching this because you care about us, about our bond, about who we really are behind the cameras, then thank you. I'm ready to be honest. I'm ready to tell the truth the way it happened, the way I felt it. Because there was a day that changed everything between me and Jungkook. And it all started in the most unexpected moment. I don't think anyone ever understood how heavy everything felt at that time. Everyone saw the laughter, the performances, the interviews where we proudly said we were fine, but I wasn't. I was tired, overworked, and silently fighting thoughts I didn't even know how to explain. And because I didn't want to bother anyone, I kept everything to myself. It was easier to smile for the world than to admit I was breaking inside. I remember walking into the bathroom at the dorm that night, closing the door behind me like I was shutting out the entire world. I stood under the warm water, and for the first time in months, I let myself stop pretending. I wasn't Taehyung of BTS in that moment. I was just a young man who desperately needed a minute to breathe. The water drowned out every noise from the dorm, and for a few minutes, it felt like peace. I didn't hear the door open, I didn't hear footsteps, I didn't hear anything at all except the water running down my skin. Then I turned, and Jungkook was standing there. We froze, both of us. His eyes widened like he didn't mean to be there, and mine widened for the same reason. He wasn't supposed to walk in, and I wasn't supposed to be that vulnerable in front of him. People probably expect me to say it was funny, embarrassing, chaotic, but it wasn't. It wasn't anything like that. It was quiet. We didn't say a word. And in that silence, something hit me dangerously hard. I had never let anybody see me without my walls, without the character, without the mask. But Jungkook saw me, not the idol, not the persona, just me. I wasn't covered. I wasn't composed. I wasn't acting strong. I was exposed. Completely. I reached for a towel, avoiding his eyes, like if I looked, he would see every part of me that I'd kept buried: my stress, my loneliness, my exhaustion, my fear of failing or disappointing people. I was terrified that he saw not just my body, but everything I had been hiding. When I finally spoke, my voice cracked. I asked him, "Why are you here?" But Jungkook didn't answer right away. He didn't tease me. He didn't laugh. He didn't make it awkward. He just looked at me with this expression like he understood something, without needing an explanation. Like he had been waiting for me to break because he knew I wouldn't allow myself to do it unless someone witnessed it. And in that moment, I felt anger and relief all at once. Anger because he had seen me at my weakest, and relief because maybe deep down I wanted someone to finally notice. He whispered, "Hyung, are you okay? No cameras, no audience, no noise." Someone finally asked me that, and it broke me more than anything else could. I wanted to tell him I was fine because that was my default answer, but I couldn't. I didn't have the strength to lie anymore. My voice shook as I said, "No, I'm not." It was the first time I had said those words out loud. And that, not the shower, not the surprise, not the shock, that honesty was the moment everything between us changed forever. Not in the way tabloids want to twist it, not in a scandalous way, but in the most human way possible. Because from that night on, Jungkook wasn't just a teammate, a friend, or a little brother. After I told Jungkook I wasn't okay, something inside me shifted. It felt like those words had been chained inside my chest for years, and suddenly, just by saying them, I had unlocked the flood I couldn't control anymore. I didn't cry, not the way people expect. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud. I just stood there with the towel in my hands, feeling the weight of everything I'd been holding pressed against me like gravity suddenly doubled. Jungkook didn't move toward me, and I was grateful for that. If he had tried to comfort me physically, I think I would have collapsed right there. Instead, he just leaned his back against the sink, giving me space but not leaving the room. It was like he understood exactly what I needed. Not distance, but not pressure either. That's the thing about him. He pays attention in ways most people don't. I sat on the floor because my legs felt too weak to hold everything anymore. And when I did, I felt so small. I remember thinking, if anyone sees me like this part of me will never be mine again. But Jungkook didn't pick up his phone, didn't joke, didn't panic, didn't treat me like I was fragile. He just sat down across from me, mirroring my position, knees pulled close, like he was trying to meet me at my level. He asked me again quietly, "What's wrong?" And I laughed, not because it was funny, but because I didn't know how to fit months of exhaustion and pressure into a sentence. How do you explain feeling trapped when the whole world thinks you're living a dream? How do you say you're overwhelmed when millions of people believe you're unbreakable? I didn't know where to start, so I didn't start with words. I just breathed out everything I'd been choking on. "I'm tired, Jungkook," I finally said. Not tired like I need sleep. Tired like I don't remember who I am if people aren't watching. He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to fix anything. He just listened. It was the first time in a long time someone let me talk without treating me like a script. I told him how sometimes the pressure felt like a cage, how the expectations never stopped growing, how every mistake felt like a monster waiting to destroy everything we'd worked for. I told him how I felt guilty for wanting a break, guilty for even thinking I deserved to breathe. He didn't look away once. That mattered more than he probably realized. When I paused, scared that I had said too much, he finally spoke. "Hyung, I noticed those things. I just didn't know if you wanted me to." That That sentence hit me harder than anything else because I didn't know the answer. I didn't know if I wanted anyone to notice. It was easier to pretend I was strong, but also painful to stay invisible. I didn't understand myself enough to choose. I whispered, I don't want to be a burden. And he shook his head immediately with a firmness I didn't expect. You're not a burden. You've never been. For a second, I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. We had been living together for years, spending almost every day side by side, but somehow we had also been separated by our own fears and personal battles. We were a team, yet we didn't always know how to lean on each other. That night changed that for me. He asked, why didn't you tell us earlier? I almost smiled at how simple the question sounded. Because the truth was painful. Because if I break, then who do they look to? I always felt like I had to be composed, goofy at the right times, calm at the right times, strong at the right times, like a character people needed, not a human with flaws. Jungkook didn't argue with me. He didn't say I was wrong. Instead, he said something I'll never forget. You don't have to be the strong one every day. Someone else can be strong for you sometimes. No one had ever told me that. And maybe that was the precise second something inside me began to soften the walls I'd built around myself, the mask I glued on for years, the belief that I had to carry everything alone. They didn't disappear that night, but they cracked. Not because Jungkook barged in on me, not because the moment was shocking, but because for once I wasn't invisible. I wrapped the towel tighter around myself and took a long breath, realizing something terrifying and comforting. Life didn't depend on me acting unbreakable. Maybe it was okay to be human. It took me a long time to respond after Jungkook said I didn't have to be strong every day. His words sat in the space between us like a truth I had avoided for too long. I stared at the floor, my hair dripping water onto the tiles, and all I could think about was how backwards everything had become. We had millions of people supporting us, yet somehow I had never felt more alone than in those months. And the scariest part was realizing that loneliness wasn't because nobody cared, it was because I refused to let anyone in. Jungkook stayed quiet and I knew he was giving me time. He's always been that way, gentle without trying, understanding without forcing it. People see him as the energetic one, the funny one, the confident one, but there's a version of him most people never see. A version that watches everything quietly, remembers things others forget, and feels deeper than he lets on. In that moment, that was the version sitting across from me. I didn't want to cry, but my eyes burned. I wasn't crying because I was sad. I was crying because I had finally stopped running. And when you stop running, pain catches up. I told him things that night. I had never said out loud how I felt pressured to live up to the image fans loved, how criticism online made me question my worth, how every time I tried to rest I felt guilty, like I was letting everyone down. I told him how I sometimes woke up scared that one day people would realize I wasn't good enough. I don't know why I trusted him with those thoughts, but it felt like he was the only person I could say them to without being judged or misunderstood. He listened to every word, eyes soft, jaw tight, like he was angry at the world for putting that weight on me. When I finally stopped talking, He said something simple but powerful. Hyung, even if everything disappeared one day, even if fans stopped watching, even if the world turned its back, I would still be here. Not because of BTS, because of you. I didn't know how to respond. No one had ever separated me from the idol version of me before. For so long, I thought people cared about me because of what I could give them: songs, performances, personality, comfort. But Jungkook was telling me he cared without needing anything in return. I realized then why him walking in on me mattered so much, not because I was naked, but because that was the only way I could have been forced to stop acting. If he had knocked, I would have prepared myself. I would have put on the smiling version he was used to. But because he saw me without warning, he saw the truth. And instead of running from it, he stayed. We left the bathroom eventually, but something between us was different. Walking out of that room felt like stepping into a new chapter of our relationship, one that had nothing to do with being bandmates, nothing to do with roles, nothing to do with the image people projected onto us. It wasn't romantic, it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't complicated. It was real. From that night on, Jungkook started checking in on me quietly. He didn't ask, "Are you okay?" In front of the others, he waited until we were alone. He didn't cling or hover, he just made sure I never had to face heavy days by myself again. Sometimes he would hand me a warm drink before rehearsals without saying anything. Sometimes he would sit next to me during long rides, headphone splitter between us so we could listen to music in silence. It was small things, but they mattered more than anything. I didn't tell anyone what happened in the bathroom. It wasn't a secret because it was embarrassing. It was a secret because it was sacred. It belonged to us, just us. And a part of me feared that if I told the others, they would worry about me. Or worse, they would treat me differently. I didn't want to become someone people pitied. Jungkook never spoke about it either. Not once, not even indirectly. He carried that moment like a responsibility he never asked for but chose anyway. Sometimes during rehearsals, he would look at me from across the room, just checking. Sometimes I would look back, and that was enough. We didn't need words after that. We just understood each other in a way we never had before. The moment that changed everything between us didn't happen in the bathroom. It happened months later in a hallway during tour. And it was that second moment, the one that no one in the world knows about, that made me realize Jungkook wasn't just someone who comforted me when I was weak. He was someone who would fight for me long before I ever asked. And that moment is the real turning point. Because that was the day I learned Jungkook wasn't only someone who saw me at my lowest. Tour life has a strange way of convincing you that everything is fine. There are lights, cheers, fireworks, and a sea of purple that makes you believe you're invincible. But when the show ends and the makeup comes off and the noise disappears, you're left with a version of yourself you can't hide from. The one who's tired, the one who feels everything when the world goes quiet. After that night in the bathroom, Jungkook and I didn't talk deeply every day. We didn't suddenly become dramatic or overly emotional. We just became aware. Aware of each other in a way we weren't before. If I looked exhausted, he noticed. If he looked frustrated, I noticed. We didn't say much, we just understood. But there was one night, the night that truly shifted everything. We had just finished performing in a city that had screamed louder than any crowd I could remember. I should have been on a high, but instead, I felt like a balloon that had been stretched too far. During the encore, I forced smiles, but my chest was pounding with a fear I didn't recognize. The pressure had followed me off stage and cornered me like a shadow too close to outrun. I slipped away from the others after the show, walking down a quiet backstage hallway where the decorations looked almost eerie once the lights dimmed. I tried to calm myself, gripping the railing as I stared at the floor, counting my breaths, forcing myself not to fall apart. But my vision blurred anyway. The noise I had been suppressing returned louder than the stadium we had just performed in. Every insecurity, every expectation, every cruel comment I had ever read online poured into my head like someone had ripped open a dam. You're not good enough. You're the weakest one. You're only where you are because of the others. Replaceable. Useless. People think words online are easy to ignore, but sometimes they stick to the deepest parts of you. I didn't hear Jungkook approaching. Not again. He always seemed to appear when I reached my breaking point. Taehyung? He called softly. I kept my back turned. I didn't want him to see my face not like that, not twisted by fear. I said, I just need a second. But my voice betrayed me. It sounded small and scared. He didn't leave. Instead, he walked closer and stood beside me, leaning on the same railing, like he was saying, if you're going to struggle, I'll struggle next to you. For a moment, we said nothing, just breathing, both of us catching air after running a marathon that no one else could see. Then Jungkook spoke, voice incredibly calm, too calm for how worried he looked. Hyung, tell me what's happening. I shook my head. I can't. I felt pathetic saying it. I didn't want him to carry more weight because of me. He didn't let that answer win. He stepped in front of me and gently grabbed my wrist, not to restrain me, but to keep me here, grounded, real. Look at me. I resisted for a second, but then I looked, and I saw anger in his eyes, not at me, but at everything hurting me. He asked again, what's happening to you? And the truth just slipped out. I'm scared, I whispered. Scared that I'm not enough. Scared that fans will change their mind about me. Scared that I'll disappoint everyone. Scared that if I fail, everything will fall apart because of me. The silence that followed was the loudest I'd ever experienced. Jungkook's jaw tightened. His breathing changed, not steady anymore, but sharp like he was holding back emotion he didn't want me to see. For a moment, his eyes glistened. Then he spoke, voice shaking in a way I'd never heard before. Hyung, if you disappear, everything falls apart because of us, not you. I blinked, confused. He continued. You carry more than you should, more than any of us realized. You think you have to be perfect, but you don't. We're still here because we're together, not because you never get tired. He paused, swallowing hard. And if someone can see how important you are, then they never deserve you. I didn't mean to cry, but tears came anyway. Jungkook stepped closer, arms hesitating for a split second before wrapping around me tight. Not a polite hug, not a friendly pat. A desperate hold like he was trying to make sure I didn't fade away. I broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like a star collapsing inside itself. He held me until I stopped shaking. We didn't talk after that. Not that night. We didn't need to. Everything was already said. Something about that moment changed the way I saw him. He wasn't the younger brother who needed guidance. He was the person who kept showing up when I couldn't hold myself together. And I realized something both comforting and terrifying. He saw every version of me, the strong one, the broken one, the one that wasn't performing, and he didn't leave. Not then. Not ever. After that night in the hallway, something unspoken began to live between us, a connection that didn't need words, promises, or explanations. We didn't suddenly become different people. We didn't cling to each other or show dramatic affection on stage. Life continued. Rehearsals, schedules, photo shoots, concerts, interviews, everything kept moving. But there was a quiet understanding beneath it all. When things got too loud in my head, Jungkook would sit beside me without being asked. When he struggled, I started noticing it the same way he noticed mine. We were no longer just living in the same group, we were living in the same emotional space. But human connections are complicated. With support comes fear. With comfort comes vulnerability. And with vulnerability comes danger. Because the closer Jungkook got to me, the more terrified I became of losing him. I started overthinking everything, every conversation, every moment of silence, every expression on his face. I would ask myself, does he really care? Is it just temporary? What if one day he gets tired of supporting me? What if I'm asking for too much without saying a word? I didn't want to depend on him, not because I didn't trust him, but because needing someone felt like a risk I didn't know how to navigate. And the truth is, the deeper you care for someone, the deeper the fear of losing them becomes. One night after rehearsals, the members went out to eat, but I stayed behind in the practice room. I said I was tired, but I was lying. I just didn't want anyone to see that my mind was spiraling again. I sat on the floor, staring at the mirror, not the real one, but the one that reflects every insecurity back at you without mercy. I tried to convince myself I didn't need help, that I was fine again, that I could handle everything on my own. But then the practice room door opened, and without even turning my head, I knew who it was. Jungkook walked in and sat beside me. He didn't ask why I stayed behind. He didn't tell me to talk. He simply leaned back against the mirror like he planned to stay as long as it took. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he said, "You're avoiding me again?" He didn't say it angrily. He said it like someone who had been hurt quietly, not loudly. My heart dropped. I didn't mean to hurt him. I didn't mean to push him away. But I also didn't know how to let someone in without feeling like I was burdening them. I said, "I'm not avoiding you." But I was. And he knew it. He shook his head slowly. You think leaning on someone makes you weak, but pushing people away doesn't make you strong either. Those words hit me harder than anything else that night. I never realized how obvious my fear was to him, how clearly he could read me. It was like he saw through every defense I tried to build. I whispered, "I don't want you to feel like you have to take care of me." He replied immediately, "I don't have to. I want to. That sentence broke something in me in a good way, but also in a painful way. Because no matter how badly I wanted to trust it, a part of me kept asking, what if he changes his mind someday? What if this connection isn't permanent? So I asked the one question I had been scared to say out loud. Why are you doing this? Jungkook didn't answer right away. He looked at me with that same intensity he had the night in the hallway, not dramatic, not emotional, but deeply honest. Because I don't want you to disappear, he said. Not from the group, not from us, and not from yourself. I wasn't expecting that. It wasn't poetic, it wasn't dramatic, it was raw. The kind of truth that doesn't come from the mouth, but from the scars someone carries. I looked away because if I kept looking at him, I would break again. He noticed. He gently took my wrist the same way he did the first time and said, it's okay to need people. It's okay to not be okay. You don't have to fight alone. And then he said something that changed everything, not in a loud, fireworks kind of way, but in a quiet, irreversible way. I'm not leaving, Hyung. Not now. Not later. I don't know why, but hearing those words scared me more than breaking down in the bathroom ever did. Because for the first time in my life, I realized something terrifying. I cared about him staying more than I cared about anything else. Letting someone matter that much is the most frightening kind of trust. That night, I leaned my head on his shoulder for the first time, not because I was weak, not because I needed saving, but because I finally allowed myself to rest. And the moment my head touched him, Jungkook whispered something so quietly. I'm not even sure he intended me to hear it. I always choose you, Hyung. He probably thought I didn't notice, but I did. And that sentence didn't just comfort me, it changed the way I breathed. I remember the day everything finally reached its breaking point. We were in the practice room rehearsing the same choreography for hours. Everyone was exhausted, frustrated, silent. Jungkook made a tiny mistake during the last chorus, and the dance leader snapped at him. Hard. Too hard. I could see Jungkook shutting down instantly, that look he always gets when he's trying not to feel anything. And somehow I took it personally, not because of the mistake, but because I knew he was hurting and I couldn't do anything about it. After practice, everyone left little by little. Yoongi, Namjoon, Jimin, Jin, Hobi, until it was just the two of us. Jungkook was sitting against the mirror, head down, breathing heavily, pretending not to be affected. He always did that, acted strong, acted untouchable, acted fine. I sat down next to him without saying anything, and for a long time, we just stayed there, both pretending not to wait for the other to speak first. Eventually, Jungkook whispered, barely audible, why do you keep looking at me like I'm falling apart? His voice cracked. He didn't want me to hear it, but I did. I took a deep breath before answering, trying to stay gentle. Because I know you, I said, better than anyone else. He turned to me with this expression, half anger, half fear, half relief, like he was terrified that I could see him dead clearly, but also relieved that someone finally did. Then he said something I never expected. You make it too hard to hide. That sentence hit me harder than anything in the world, because at that moment I realized our relationship, whatever it was, had crossed a line that neither of us were ready to acknowledge. We weren't just friends. We weren't just members. There was something deeper underneath everything we did, everything we avoided, everything we didn't say. And it scared both of us. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat as I asked him, "Hide what?" He froze. Jungkook had always been fearless on stage, fearless with fans, fearless with strangers. But sitting next to me in that quiet practice room, he looked terrified. Terrified of the truth, terrified of ruining something, terrified of wanting something he didn't know how to name. He didn't answer. Instead, he stood up abruptly and grabbed his bag. I thought he was leaving, but then he stopped and turned back toward me, and there was this storm behind his eyes. "Taehyung," he said slowly, "if I tell you, you won't look at me the same." That's when I realized I wasn't the only one struggling with the truth. Whatever happened that night in the bathroom wasn't an accident. It wasn't just shock. It wasn't just embarrassment. It changed us. We were both pretending nothing happened because acknowledging it meant acknowledging everything. The feelings we didn't understand, the connection we didn't control, the line we were afraid to cross. I swallowed hard and told him, "I already don't look at you the same." Silence, heavy, electrical silence. Then Jungkook whispered, "That's the problem." And he walked out of the room before I could say anything. I just sat there, staring at the empty space where he had been, knowing we had reached a point of no return. Not because something happened between us, but because something was happening and we no longer had the power to pretend it wasn't. That was the night I realized we could avoid the truth. We could run from the truth. But sooner or later, the truth was going to catch us. When I look back now, it's strange how one unexpected moment can echo through years of someone's life. That night, the night Jungkook saw me, the night everything shifted, it wasn't the moment itself that changed us. It was what it forced us to confront. It was the truth, standing right in front of us, refusing to be ignored any longer. We weren't ready for it. We weren't strong enough to talk about it. So instead of facing it together, we tried to run from it separately. For a long time, I told myself that silence was a kind of protection, that pretending everything was fine meant the team would stay strong, the music wouldn't be affected, and our bond would stay unbreakable. I convinced myself that ignoring what I felt was the mature thing to do, but the truth is, silence doesn't protect anything. It only builds walls where there used to be connection. It creates distance where there used to be comfort. And it turns someone you care about into a stranger, not because the feelings disappear, but because you're afraid to show them. There were days when we laughed again, days when we performed shoulder to shoulder, days when the world saw us and believed nothing was wrong. And maybe that was the hardest part. The world saw us as unshakable, and maybe we wanted to believe that too. But inside, there were things we couldn't say, things we didn't know how to say. So we kept smiling, even when our hearts were heavy. We kept working, even when we were hurting. We kept pretending, even when the pretending was the thing tearing us apart. I don't blame Jungkook for anything, and I don't blame myself either. We were young, we were overwhelmed, we were just two people trying to navigate something we didn't understand under the weight of a world that saw everything except the truth. If you're watching this because you support us, because you've loved us through every era and every change, thank you. You've seen us as artists, as idols, as performers, but today you saw me as a person, and that means more than I can explain. I didn't share this story to cause drama or speculation. I shared it because some truths deserve to be spoken, not buried, because healing doesn't happen in silence. And because honesty, even when it's painful, is still love. I don't know what the future looks like for me and Jungkook. Maybe it's reconciliation, maybe it's understanding, maybe it's the kind of peace that only comes after two people stop running from what they feel. So, thank you for listening to my truth, not the polished version, not the idol version, just Taehyung. And maybe this isn't the ending. Maybe this is the beginning of finally learning how to talk about the things that hurt and the things that matter.